That's fun. You don't have to run it under water. Okay. One a little bit, it's still going.
Good.
And everyone here? Like it. Gavel. Here's what? I think it's not.
Anymore. So figure out who's here over time.
Hey, Cameron. Yeah. Where are we having media? Back there? Here, Cameron, I'll help you. Everything. We're gonna turn around, Cameron.
Yes.
There you go. Yes, you're welcome. I have 6:01. I'm gonna go ahead and call this meeting to order. Will the recorder please call the roll? Counselor Irvin?
Here.
Counselor Dreer? Here. Counselor Platt?
Here.
Counselor Meredith?
Here.
Counselor Savage? Here. Counselor Smith? Here. Mayor Susie? Here. Amanda Gilbert? Danny Susie?
Here.
Shirley Sales? Here. Amanda Baylor? Amber? Here. Did I say it? Right.
Here. Here.
Now we'll move on to item number 3, election of budget committee officers. Our chair last year was Amanda Gilbert. Our vice chair was Dana Mary Day. So now we need to elect some, usually how we do it is they move on in succession. And so I would like to have Dana Mary Day, if he would be willing to be the chair this session. And I would like to nominate Amber Bernard, or Amber. Sorry, Amber. That's twice. As the vice chair. And secretary, I would like to nominate Bernard. Bernie. So do you have any seconds on that?
Should close nominations.
Both.
Yeah, so you see if there are any more nominations and then.
Are there any more nominations?
Only, I know tradition is what it is, but I think it was an alternation of council, non-council in the positions. So if we were in keeping with that, I would nominate Councilor Dreer for the secretary position as an alternate to the first nomination.
I think at the time I was serving first as an officer, I was not on the council. That has a spin on it. As a citizen.
Correct. So would you be willing to
Yes.
take on the chair position? All right. Amber, would you be willing to take on that vice chair? Councilor Dreer? Yes. Secretary?
Close the nominations.
Close the nominations. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So with that, I will hand the meeting over to Councilor Mary Day.
We technically need a motion.
Thank you, Mayor.
Minutes of last time.
Yes.
Probably.
There's your script for
We
public
did
hearing.
vote.
Do you need a motion for that?
Here, so if he had said as a motion and second. I would like to request, we're not using speakers tonight. So it's really challenging for me to hear the voices up here. You're being recorded by the table mics. And so hopefully I did a test and I'll be able to play that back here really clearly. But I would ask that all of you speak up so that everyone in the room can hear, and hopefully even me back here with the air fan going there. So I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I would like to address the Budget Committee first. So as we work together in a challenging budget year, I would like to say, if you see something, say something. If you have a question, address it at the time. I've experienced the Budget Committee where we've gone through the entire budget and then things have come up at the end. So I would prefer to deal with it as we go through the budget line by line. So that being said, have you had a chance to review the minutes from the past budget committees meetings from last year of 2023? If not, take a quick look. And when you're satisfied that this reflects what we did, I will accept a motion to approve the minutes from last year's budget process.
Accept the minutes.
Second.
We have a motion with a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So does any budget committee member have any declarations to make as far as a potential or actual conflict of interest or any other thing that needs to be stated?
Mr. Chairman, my name's Mike Fleck. I work for Community Sharing Program. We're a line item in the community promotion section of this budget. If that item is discussed, I will recuse myself.
Mr. Chair, I'm Gary Manley. I work for Southland Wheels, and we're listed in the community about promotion section. I'll recuse myself when we discuss that.
We will move into public hearing. I will now open the public hearing at
Here, the proposed budget and message.
Number 6.
Oh, excuse me. Ever put on my glasses. Could we please receive the proposed budget and message from our city manager, Mike Sauerwein? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for serving on the Cottage Grove Budget Committee. Appreciate the fact that you're willing to be here this evening and volunteer your time for your city. What I'd like to do is two things. First, I'm going to review the budget message that's included in your packet, and then I'm going to briefly discuss the city's budget and financial policies that really are what we use to form the budget. So just starting with the budget message, kind of the general fund and background information as required by Oregon law. The proposed budget as presented is balanced. The expenditures for all funds are about $55 million. If we take out major grant projects like Main Street, Bohemia Park, and some interfund transfers and loans that we did to account for the ice storm damage, the budget is actually more like about $45 million. The city's permanent rate for property taxes is 7.2087 per 1,000 of assessed value. And the proposed budget includes the full permanent rate. That will generate an estimated $5,850,000. That's about $190,000 more in property taxes than we received last year. I think it's important to note that in the 2023-2024 fiscal year budget, the general fund carryover was budgeted at about $3.3 million. The actual general fund carryover was $2.2 million for a difference of about $1.1 million. And this is reflected in the proposed 2024-2025 budget, which include reductions in city staff, reorganization of some of our departments, and not funding a cost of living adjustment or a COLA for non-represented employees. Just to hit a few highlights of the proposed budget, we have our special revenue grant fund. That's where we're keeping the money for the Main Street and the Bohemia Park projects. We have done some reorganization. We added a human resources department this year. And also, just speaking of employees, I think it's important to really note that the city is a service-based organization. We are people providing services to our residents. That's how I view the city, and I think that's how our employees view the city. And we'll be operating under the third year of collective bargaining agreements with the general unit and our Public Works Laborers unit. They will receive a 3.9% cost of living allowance as outlined in their collective bargaining agreement. And the Police Guild members will also receive a 3.5% cost of living adjustment. Again, that's reflected in their collective bargaining agreements. And as I said a moment ago, the 2024-2025 proposed budget includes a 0% cost of living allowance for all full-time non-represented employees, although under city policy, they would have been eligible for a 3.9% increase. For water and wastewater and stormwater utilities, we have a 5-year financial plan, and we have adjusted the rates accordingly with that 5-year financial plan. The proposed rates result in about an $8.62 monthly increase for residential users of about 5,000 gallons of water a month. And also last, I just wanted to mention our golf course, which was really impacted by the ice storms. They were closed for about 2.5 months, but the good news is that really hasn't severely impacted our revenue because the course is being very heavily utilized. We did increase the rate for cart rentals, and that's to offset an increased maintenance cost. So again, thank you everyone for serving on the Budget Committee. I'll be happy to take any questions you might have.
Any copies of the budget here? Because this would be the budget meeting where you'd be able to get a copy of the budget. Is that correct? It would be like a stack of them for all the public coming.
So this is actually not a time for public comments.
Point taken.
Chair, I do have a question. When you talk about the FY24 budget and the carryover, was it the carryover from the FY23 budget? Or what we budgeted that we thought at the end of FY24 we would carry over into this FY25 budget?
The fiscal year 23-24 was budgeted at 3.9 million, and we didn't walk in with 3.9 million. We walked in with the 2,205,000 that's listed in the budget message.
You know, the 2.2.
2.2.
Yeah.
So it's the ending balance at 22-23, walking into 23-24 that was short.
And, you know, since you asked about it, I want to be clear. The finance director was notifying the council and as early as the end of the first quarter of this fiscal year, last fall, of the situation. And when I started in January, one of the first conversations I had with Bert, she explained to me, you know, this potential deficit. So to the finance department's credit, they have been very upfront about the fact that we did not receive about $1.1 million in revenue this last year that we did budget for.
So that was primarily an expense or a lack of revenue.
A lack of revenue.
Lack of revenue. And what would be the primary source of that revenue?
It's not just a lack of revenue. If you have a budget that you have a ending fund balance of, say, it's 500 and some $1,000 that year, and it's available to spend up into the budgeted amount. But if you overstate what you believe you're going to have left at the end of the year, walking into the next year, you find yourself short. So it's a revenue shortfall, but it isn't because you didn't receive the revenue you thought you would, other than you estimated your beginning carryover more than what you actually walked in with. So if you had expenditures that weren't expected, it was still available to spend as a budgeted item. Because at the end of the day, all that's required under Oregon law is to have the unappropriated ending fund balance as your balance walking into the next year. So if your revenues are not keeping up with your expenditures, you're going to find yourself eating away at what you have to spend, and it's not being replaced.
This year, we're adjusting.
And this year it has caught up with us. It's been about a 3-year development. Looking back on our cash carryover being just a little bit less than what we anticipated, you can see that on the first line of the revenue in the 24-25 budget. So the 21-22 actual was about 2.8, 22-23 was 2.5, and then it was estimated to be 3.3.
I mean, when you find yourself at the bottom of a hole, the first thing you do is stop digging. And that's what we're doing this year, is we've stopped digging and we've put together a plan to get ourselves to a balanced budget.
Ms. Sosby?
What would make that deficit be such a large amount compared to the year previous? I mean, what would, it's almost $1 million. I guess I'm not quite grasping. I know that we went down, but I wonder what, if that could be explained a little better for all of us. Like what $1 million over estimating that we would have.
Do I understand your question to be what did we spend the money on? It's not really anticipated spending it on, or what's?
Or I guess if I'm understanding you correctly, then we anticipated that we would have a lot more than we actually.
Right.
What made the city assume that we would have an extra $1 million? Was it grants? Was it that didn't come in, or?
No, it's not a lack of money coming in that we anticipated. It's a matter of more money was spent, not keeping up. Revenue was not keeping up with the expenditures available to spend, legally spent within the budgets. But when you estimate this number, it is March, April, come to budget committee in May, and you're anticipating what departments are not going to spend for the balance of that fiscal year. You're anticipating revenues that you may not even receive until August 30th because we're on modified accrual. So any revenues that were directed to the fiscal year 23-24, we may not even know until the end of August what those actually are, specifically the Northwest Natural Gas franchise. It's every year, last minute, I don't receive that check from them until the last day of August.
So the way I'm understanding it too is, so there was a lot less coming in, but yet our expenditures were a lot higher as well.
Right.
With the, and I went through and kind of mapped out some of our expenditures that were not normal for us. You know, we had to pay an interim chief, and that was $41K. We had to pay an interim city manager. We had increase in library. Almost, was it almost double?
Over
Or
a period of years,
Like
yes.
3 years.
You had increases in your library expenses.
we had a jail contract of 144,000. Our sheriff's department had to cover for us because we had lack of police coverage of 67,000. The Highway 99 shelter was 10,800. The bucks for the homeless shelter was 24K budgeted. So was there anything else that you could touch on there?
Well, over a period of years, you've seen your cash carryover going down. And so it could be expenditures in any department within the general fund. It's not just related to that specific event, but over time, you're spending more than what your revenue is being replaced. If your revenues don't go up, but your cost of living adjustment does for every single employee, and we are like Manager Sauerwein stated, we are employee driven, we are service driven. So if you offer a 3.9% and your taxes went up 3%, you have to do a 5% cost of living adjustment. Your taxes still just went up 3%. And you're not seeing other revenues being increased in this budget. And at some point, your revenue is coming down and your expenditures are going up, and we're at that point where we have to correct it.
Let me ask it a different way. So do you know where that money went? Which line items, which things in the budget went over their budget in order to eat up that?
Nobody went over their budget.
Nobody went over their budget.
So you're spending more than you had spent in prior years. That money's being recognized as, oh, we're going to carry it over. But if you continue to spend more than what you're bringing in year over year, and it's about 3 years, it finally catches up.
Can I attempt to share? I'll draw it to last year. We had to make a correction in our utility rates. Very similar in the utility rates. We set our rates. FCS makes a recommendation on what they predict our employee costs are going to be, what our material costs are going to be, and they make a recommendation on what the rates are going to be, what they're going to bring in based on what they're predicting the expenses to be. We went through COVID, and because of COVID, we saw fuel prices, we saw material costs, we saw everything skyrocket, much higher than their usual 3 to 3.5% allocation for those normal increases. We recognized that prior to the budget last year. We engaged with FCS and had them restudy our rates compared to what the actual increases in material costs were, because we noticed that we were chipping into our carry forward. We would normally carry $600,000-$700,000 over from one year to the next year, and suddenly now we only have $150,000 worth of carryover, and we can't balance our projected expenses with labors in the proposed budget. So we were able to analyze that and realize that 50% increase in chemicals and various different things, which we had no control over, were causing us to eat into the carry forward. And if we were continuing to go down that road without making an adjustment, luckily we were able to increase. The council and budget committee recommended fee increases so that we could maintain our services. Fortunately, in the general fund, as you know, almost over 50% of the general fund revenue comes from property tax revenue. And if it only increases at 3% and you're driving materials, labor, and expenses are more, and you're cutting into your carry forward to pay for that year, you have less carry forward to carry forward the next year. And that's what's happened.
Councilor Irvin?
Thank you. So definition of carryover, is that the ending carryover amount? Is that
Unappropriated ending fund balance.
it's a defined amount, right? Because you said all of the other things were budgeted. we have the
Your carryover is part of your revenues, so your budget includes that carryover. At the end of the day, your revenues equal your expenditures. You can budget to have a contingency amount that isn't allocated to any specific department or line item within the general fund, and you can also have an unappropriated fund balance. And other than that, everything can be spent within that budget. So what really needs to happen is that we need to see the unappropriated fund balance being increased to offset not being able to have the revenue that we need, so that you're guaranteed an amount coming forward.
what is the unspent amount in each budget called?
That is the ending fund balance, but become cash carried forward for the next year. At the end of the budget, that budget year, you're looking at all of your revenues that came in, you're looking at all of your expenditures that went out, and what's left is your cash carry forward for the next year.
The cash carryover is the amount of money we have in the bank on July 1. And, you know, the obvious reason why we need to have a good, healthy cash carryover is cash flow. We receive our income largely from property taxes, and property taxes don't come in until, you know, toward the end of the year. And we got to get there from July 1.
We have a policy at the beginning of this budget that stipulates the unappropriated fund balance being 5% of the operating budgets, contingency being at 3%.
It doesn't include your one-time expenditures such as grant money and out, your interfund transfers. So I do a calculation at the end of my spreadsheet that shows me that 3% and that 5% amount, and if we've met that target or not. I would suggest that that's not a large enough target.
That's kind of to the point, what would be the target to aim at now, and assuming it might take a few years to
Because
get to it, but we set a policy.
at a 5%, let me look it up real quickly here for you. So a 5% carryover would be $420,224. A 3% for your contingency amount is $302,000. So you're going to need it significantly larger over the next few years. I would suggest that we shoot for that you're going to walk in with at least a $2 million balance. Because that's what you're seeing that you're needing to move forward with. And that's a guaranteed going to be there. If you put that in that unappropriated fund balance line, it cannot be spent short of a natural disaster.
So there's different ways to conceptualize that 2 million. That maybe for our budget size right now, but so percentage, another way to think about it would be how much operating leeway, operating the city, if we don't get expected funds or if there's a hazard there. Is 2 million a year of staff operation? It sounds like maybe 6 months potentially.
I could run those numbers for you to get you closer to that, but I would say we're spending probably $400,000 to $500,000 a month, but that's all of the city's payroll. So I could chunk it out to just be general fund.
I would appreciate having that as far as the target, saying, hey, maybe in year 2, we target, a quarter of operating expenses. Year 3, we try to get to, half a year. If we look at other, emergency planned organizations and look at what those standards are and adopt that.
So this is for my due diligence and so I can sleep good at night. You do not feel that everything's accounted for, it's just like there's no reason that we need to do an audit or an external audit or anything?
Annual audit. We are behind this year in that we didn't have things prepared and it got scheduled a little bit later, and then the auditors didn't show up. So we've rescheduled with them, and it's by law, every year the city is audited. So the only year that hasn't been is the 23-24. And we'll be doing that in June is when I'm back on their calendar. There's a shortage of auditors in the state of Oregon, and it's evident they are having difficulty hiring and told me that they've been looking for someone for 6 to 7 months now to fill a manager position for them to be able to do audits. And they're just not out there. So yes, we are behind in that, but I do not believe that an audit is going to show you that there's anything amiss with the record keeping. I believe that it's simply a matter of an overstatement of a cash carry forward number that is an estimate, just like the rest of the budget is an estimate. And it was estimated high.
Good, thank you.
Finance Director Blakens, when you presented to the council and we had all the funds with green lights, yellow lights and red lights, this was an indication of where we were going in this manner, right?
That was in March that actually arrived at your desk. But I had spoken with the previous 2 city managers, and I first had my opportunity in March to come forward to the city council.
Yes.
Just looking at this overview, just so I understand the connection between the contingency and the unappropriated. Am I looking at it correctly under the requirements when I see contingency and unappropriated ending balance? Is that what we're projecting for the end of this fiscal year?
Correct. It's a total number on the far right is the whole funds.
Okay.
So it accumulates it across the sheet.
Okay.
Comes down individually for each fund.
So then if our 3% for contingency is 302, we're looking really good, or
302 would be what was required only for the general fund.
only general
And
fund?
that's per this policy. So we're meeting the policy, but what my suggestion is we need to review that and up the percentage that we carry forward to be able to meet our needs. Not find yourself in this position.
Okay, so we're talking about just the general, and then the general,
We're only in the general fund right now.
okay. And that's where the biggest concern is?
Yes, the other funds are funded, and I don't think that we had any difficulties in balancing those funds this year.
Okay, so I'm reading that we're meeting the policy, maybe a little bit more for the general fund based on what's proposed, but it's far short of where we're comfortable.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm worried. I mean, I don't mean to jump ahead, but we're proposing ending contingency and unfunded of $1 million, which is down from the 2.2, which is down from the 2.2. I'm sorry, I've got a headache. That we ended up with, which means we're going into reserves. And I'll be honest, I would prefer not to see that. The sad reality is we're probably going to have to let some positions go, whether that's this year or next. I think that's, something for this body to decide. And, with help from our, finance and city manager, but I'm very worried about our ending balance across all funds.
And we will have opportunities during this coming fiscal year, 24-25, to review what we can do to increase those revenues, be it a fee, be it a local option levy, be it some sort of revenue that is fresh and new that comes into the general fund that we can support what we need to be spending on. Unfortunately, you can't do anything about your tax revenue. So going to the legislature and saying, we need something changed. This measure is limiting and not giving the cities, and we're not the only city in this position. Worst county, we're all in the same struggle in trying to make our expenses match with our revenues. And it's nearly impossible for a lot of us. But we have to be looking for those fresh, new revenue dollars that could come in. What's out of the box? What have we not done before? And we'll have that opportunity, and as we know this going into next fiscal year, to make proposals to the city council to see this funding increase and not have to be in the same position.
Assistant.
Is that something we've been looking at already, I'd assume, or has it been kind of an accumulating effect of the rising costs? Kind of
By already looking at, do you mean for this fiscal?
adding to the revenue in the general fund, innovative ways to do so.
We've definitely started having those conversations at a staff level. I don't think we're to the point now where we're prepared to, bring an actual proposal to council. But, we definitely are starting to have those conversations.
If I might add, the council did approve planning fees increase. Planning is pretty much supported by the general fund. And we recognize that we needed to increase the revenue to support the department at a higher level. And so that was an opportunity that we took. The council approved, about 3-4 meetings ago, 2-3 meetings ago. So that's an area that we actually brought to the council and have acted on sooner than later.
So Councilor Stinnett, under your administration fees in the general fund revenue, we looked at increasing that from an 8% fee to a 10% fee this year. And it's based on the prior year's expenditures that each of these funds that are listed here on your general revenue page had spent. And then it's a calculation on what should be coming forward out of those funds that aren't general fund monies, but that general fund is supporting. And so in an effort to increase our revenues, this year we went from $805,000 up to $1,056,000. It has to be reasonable to be able to charge that administration fee. And we look at the major projects we do and then limit that to an $805,000 expense and then calculate the admin fee off of that. Typically, if it was a $2 million project, it doesn't require as much administration fees as for the whole amount. We wouldn't get as much project done if we allocated that full fee to it, but it's a formula we've been using for several years. And this is the first time in recent history that it's been increased. So we were looking for ways to bolster that revenue on the general fund.
Chair.
Thank you, Chair. When you say administrative fees, do you mean indirect costs? Yes. Thank you.
Assistant.
If I'm jumping the gun, feel free to let me know, but how many full-time non-represented employees do we have?
Might be. How many do we have?
How many do I have?
80.
80 now?
80. Oh, non-represented? Non-represented is probably like 20. Agree.
And as a percentage of the whole?
It's about 20%.
About 20%.
Or about 100 employees.
I misunderstood your question.
You want 8?
Non-represented
Something like
full-time employees that won't be receiving in this budget is proposed not to allocate a 3.9% cost of living adjustment as in other represented units will be receiving. The part-time non-represented employees are slated in this budget to receive the increase so that we can compete with hate to say it, but the McDonald's and Taco Bells of the world. Our wages are slightly above that rate. So we felt for it to be competitive, at least at that level, to maintain that 3% cost of living adjustment.
Any other input at this point?
Mr. Chair. So I do want to also, I didn't hear you mention, in the last year, our interim director asked us for the non-representative to pick up the 6% retirement match, which we did. And so the folks who are not getting a bump for cost of living did, however, get quite a sizable bump, based on that. So I think if I understood correct, that was part of the thinking as far as trying to manage budgets while still maintaining, benefit to those employees.
Part of the issue becomes that you you funded the 6%, but now it's going to perpetuate for years down the road. So you may have had an amount set aside in a contingency to make some adjustments in personnel, but it's perpetuated. It doesn't go away unless you take away that benefit. So again, your costs went up and your revenues didn't necessarily match those costs.
We did ask that question, Klein.
Did you have?
No, that's what it is. Councilor Fleck.
Councilor Irvin?
Mr. Sauerwein and Slikens, can you kind of broad strokes talk about the philosophy that you're operating under, the policies set by the council that you're operating under to go through these cuts? Where were you prioritizing? How were you conceptualizing, the cuts that were made in the departments and the consolidations? What, just kind of what was front of mind as you were proposing this budget?
Well, the number one priority to me is not to reduce the level of service provided by the city. Now, that may not be a possible, goal to achieve. But if you're asking, where do I start? That's where I start. As I said earlier, and I mean this seriously, is we are a group of folks providing services to our residents. And the first priority is to not reduce or lower that level of service. Again, we cannot always meet that goal, but that's where I start the conversation.
There were a number of positions looked at and put on paper, what ifs this occurred. And then I received direction on Monday morning about what City Manager Sauerwein wanted to see in this proposed budget, because as budget officer, unfortunately, it lies at his feet.
Yeah, I give a huge amount of credit to all of our department directors, especially Bert, Faye, Chief, Andy, everybody who's here did an incredible job of being intellectually honest about how can we balance this budget. Because like I said, we found ourselves at the bottom of the hole. We weren't going to keep digging. We're going to figure out a way to get out of it. Now the priority going forward over the course of this next year is to make sure this doesn't happen again. So, speaking to the council as opposed to the committee, over the course of the next year, you're going to hear back from us with our ideas for, again, how we can try to maintain the level of service, but reduce the level of providing those services.
Is there
Member
groups of
sales?
services that are they're willing to lower the cost of and back them up a little bit so they cost less?
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing.
I'm sorry. Is there a list of the programs or services that they're looking at rolling back a little to reduce the cost of? Anything on the budget? Employees or salaries and benefits, but
It's hard to give you a direct answer to your question because we are formulating that and we are, at a staff level discussing it. But, there's not a chart I can point you to and say, here's the things that we're talking about.
big area.
Yeah.
To follow up on that question, I've been grappling with this as well. We're in a kind of an information famine coming into this budget in terms of what is being delivered, how much, what is the level of service that is going out there so that we can gauge whether
Right.
that's an appropriate amount or to dial it
And
back.
what is adjustable and what is not.
And so I think that's one of the things we're looking at is capturing more data going through this next year so that we can actually say, okay, this is what was delivered. There's a lot of notes as far as where's the report on that? What are the stats on stops and crime and, how do we gauge whether we're having a good delivery of service or not? So this is a really difficult budget to go through without being able to say, oh, we should pull that back
Right.
because we don't know really where it is.
Well, and like they said, our tax revenue is never going to be over 3%. So
Unless there's a
seems like
change.
what's too high, and it's been like that since Measure 5 passed.
New development adds revenue. So,
True.
so
But it also adds to the water development and the sewer lines and the
roads, and so it's not 100% gain.
Mr. Stinnett.
Thank you. When you talk about finding new and perhaps innovative ways to increase revenue in the general fund, how realistic are those? I mean, what do we think our chances are of finding new money somewhere?
There are a number of options and, I'm not going to run through them all here. But the two most prominent are special option levies, usually for something like police, or cities can adopt a police services fee. A number of cities in Oregon have. If you look at the paper, Eugene's now considering a fire services fee. So, there are some tools out there. And it's a matter of us presenting those to the council as possible options.
At a time when we're going after street funds.
And that's part of the reason why, I'm not pushing forward with this is I don't really want to muddy the water with the street issue. I mean, the council started down the road of doing some major improvements to our street system. And I don't want to muddy the waters. We're talking about other revenues about it.
Any other input at this time? And we will move into the public hearing section.
Would you like me to talk a little bit about the budget financial policies, or you're just going to consider that discussed?
It's the pleasure of the board.
For new folks, might be useful.
I will be brief. First of all, I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware of the fact that sometimes it gets skipped over and we immediately go to the numbers, that the city does have an established set of budget financial policies. And those are what staff utilizes, as we're talking with the 3% and 5% to construct the budget. And just to quickly note, it starts on page 9. We have our operating budget policies. We also that and cover everything from personnel services to capital outlay to debt and bonded debt and risk management. We have our revenue policies, talk about the fact that our assessed valuation, when we predict what it's going to be, we use a very conservative approach. And by the way, speaking for both Bert and I, our policy is very simple. We don't cook the numbers. We do not cherry pick the data. The numbers are what they are, and we put them forth that way. We try our best to provide you with clear, consistent, and information that we can, but understand the numbers are what they are. We talked a little bit about fees. Council adopted its most recent fee resolution last month. We have a debt policy that determines things like how much we'll get in general obligation bonds and what our limits on debt are. We have the reserve policy, which we were talking about earlier. We have an accounting policy that determines that we have a sound accounting system and follow generally accepted accounting principles. We have our annual audit, and also if we're going to do any kind of budget amendments, we do it consistent with state law. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the policies or go into any more detail.
Good question.
Member Baylor.
Debt policy, just want to confirm that we're all kosher and all good with our debt policy for this next year. We're not creeping too close to.
We're fine.
We're good.
Yeah. So it's calculated each year in the audit, and it's a back page that I paid particular attention to, and there was a lot of leeway for future debt. Depends on how comfortable the city is and the council are in going into debt. We have a lot of it, but we are within the limits of the state of Oregon. Thank you.
So,
Thank you. On the reserve policy, in the unappropriated fund balance, there was a third line, generate investment interest income is one of the things that can be done on the unappropriated fund balance. We're talking about potentially raising over time, just talking about other income sources. I want to understand a little bit more about what constraints are on on the kind of investment? Is this just the issuing of bonds where we get interest? That's, rate, or is it discretionary?
The city uses the state investment pool to invest our money. And that interest rate is over 5% right now. It's been as low as 0.5%. But it's a very good way to invest your money, but still keep it liquid, because I can say today I need to transfer money from our investment into the bank account and recover payroll or recover that week's expenditure. So it's very liquid for us. But it's also a good rate of return. And they work hard at that at the state level to make that happen.
So that might weigh into our policy about how much we want to set aside, not just.
The more you have aside, the more you'll have an interest income.
And aren't there rules about FDIC insurance and all of that? I mean, government can't make a lot of risky, investments.
The state will be risky.
No, but that's what I'm saying. We can't take, stocks and bonds and those sorts of things.
Book cards.
The city cannot invest in derivatives. I'm sorry, we're not going to make it. I will conclude my report.
Thank you, City Manager. Any other? Right. I will now open the public hearing at 6:51 p.m. This public hearing will be held to receive public input on possible uses of state revenue sharing monies and receive public comments and requests for appropriations. We will now take public testimony. Are there any folks on? Please approach the podium, state your name and affiliation, and make your request.
Cassie Fassbender, Olympus Valley Farmers Market. Did you all receive a copy of the letter that I sent as a request? Additional copies for you. We are here to thank you for your support of our market in the past year's budgets and to request your continued support. Due to the funds that we applied to additional staff time, we saw a 335% increase in our projects over the last year and an 84% increase in our vendor fund. The farmers market functions as a small business incubator, and we offer technical support to beginning businesses as well as direct financial support in the form of rebates from our vendor access fund. We also offer a number of food access programs, including a children's program that offers bilingual story time, crafts and activities, and we also give out vouchers to the children who participate to spend at the market. On the backside, you'll see a copy of our budget summary covering past 2 years and our projected budget for the coming year. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Just to clarify, it looks like you're asking for $5,000, which is what you asked for last year as well. So there's no change in what you're asking.
We're asking for $5,000, which is the same. Correct.
To clarify, it looks like that's already
In the budget.
in the proposed budget.
Correct.
Yes.
Any other questions from the committee to the farmers market? Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. And I know that you have a lot of programs to go to giant budget, but your support means a great deal to our market. Appreciate it.
Carter Roberts, are there anyone online that wish to provide input?
If Joel wants to speak, there's his hand.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to thank the group for just listening to a very short presentation. We've made a request for a Bohemia. I'm Joel Wrighton, Vice President of Bohemia Mining Days. We have made a request to the city for a small appropriation from the transient room tax. I think you know that Bohemia Mining Days continues to evolve from year to year. And last year, with the grant that we received from COVID funds, allowed us to put the festival on. But with increasing expenses, we are not going to hold a festival this year. We have a new board. We're working with an independent third-party advisory group to set us on a situation where we have professional management and are moving in a direction where we continue to provide a festival of a high quality and try to, continue to try to operate it at no cost. But with the rise in expenses and things being with a new board, and a lot of our past donors are looking for a festival that is more historic, concentrates more on historic, aspects of Cottage Grove rather than just a free party in the park for the city of Cottage Grove. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. The appropriation that I'm asking for is to, continue things for the insurances that we need to carry, the accounting softwares and things like that we need to move forward for in the next year. I realize this is a bad time to come in and ask for something like this. City Manager Sauerwein is doing, and the whole group is doing a fantastic job to bring the whole budget in, into balance. But we feel that Bohemia Mining Days is a valuable contribution to the city of Cottage Grove, and we are doing our best to get it put on stable financial footing to move forward. Thank you. And if there's any questions, I can do my best to answer them.
So Joel, last year I asked for financials from BMD, never did actually see any. The request at that time was $30-some thousand. And looking back at numbers, it did not seem like that was historic levels of funding. And there was a Facebook post here not too long ago, which put into some question, and I'm not suggesting anything wrong happened, but without some sort of audited financials, I don't know that I could support any sort of financial contribution from the city. I also would say that whatever that contribution would be, the room tax is about putting heads in beds, and so it would not be an appropriate use of funds in my estimation to use room tax dollars for BMD. That being said, it certainly could be a line in community promotions, but I would need the confidence to know that, BMD is a good steward of the funds and that, the festival is heading in a good direction. Any comments you can give me, to support the direction that BMD is going?
Well, we'd be happy, and I was under the impression that Scott had provided you with the end financials. We've gone through the financials in our third-party group. We're working with the Woodard Group to go through the financials from last year. We can find absolutely, all money is accounted for. There's always things in festivals, usually having to do with labor that is underestimated. Because we never get the amount of volunteers that we're supposed to, but we'd be happy to provide that to you. And I think it's a misconception. The transient room tax law says nothing about heads on beds. I've talked with a number of attorneys that work with the Oregon League of Cities. It's basically to bring, the only stipulation there that has a number is trying to bring tourists from more than 50 miles away into town, along with trying to promote activities and try to get people in from farther. And unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of information on that. In 2011, the U of O, an undergrad group of marketing students came in and they found out that 9.8% of the people at BMD were from out of state. But they also, at that point in time, and I don't think it's changed, made the comment that that's a difficult number to change because of the lack of rooms available in Cottage Grove. So Counselor Fleck, I'd be very happy to sit down and show you numbers about what we're doing and how we plan to move forward. And I think, any consideration of a portion of this room tax to BMD could certainly be done, with the stipulation that we provide you with all the information that you need.
I guess I would also offer that any contribution to you out of room tax would be less contribution to the Chamber of Commerce, which also is problematic.
I think, and our president of the chamber is there, but they only get a percentage of what the city brings in as room tax. They do not get 100%.
No, they get 25%. But that was the original agreement when the room tax was established in our town. The business community actually had come to the city and asked to have that 25%, 1% of the total room tax added for their benefit. So that is the benefit that was established.
Right. I guess there is additional room tax that comes into the city that could be looked at for this. But again, I understand the difficult situation that the city is in. We're just trying to find a way to move forward, to keep this alive and to find a financially feasible way to do it in the future.
Member Baylor?
Thank you. I don't know if you can hear me okay, Joel. I'm sorry, I wasn't clear on how much is being asked. Did I miss that?
Well, when
also
I
a
originally
question.
looked, I have been trying to get the figures of what the city of Cottage Grove brings in for room tax because I wanted to make it a percentage. And, an arbitrary figure that I came up with was a $500 per month. And that is based on nothing other than looking at what other cities have done comparable size. And when they're supporting festival activities through the transient room tax. So that's just, again, it's some research that I've done. That number is not solid again, because I've yet to, I'm being told by the state of Oregon that the figure that is dispersed to Cottage Grove is confidential and I can't get access to it for some reason.
Okay.
It's considered a tax. So that's that number is, it is somewhat arbitrary, but it is close to what we have to have going out the door, to support the underlying facilities of the festival.
Joel,
Director Likens.
Likens, did you receive my email that depicted exactly what we've received in room tax monies over the course of the last 3 quarters and what's anticipated for the balance of the year? Because if you didn't, I'd be glad to resend it.
Please resend it. I got something from the mayor that was just figures for 2 quarters, and I wasn't sure how stable that was. That number, and I assume it's come back to a stable level after COVID. But I was trying to go back in and look for the past 3 or 4 years, just to come up with a more well-balanced number.
All right, well, I'll be glad to resend that to you.
That would be great. I would appreciate that.
CC, yeah. Ms. Ludrea?
It's your. Can you hear me?
Right, Joel Wrighton, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. I'm sorry, you guys were gapped out there for a minute.
Can you repeat your request?
What is Bohemia Monday's request?
For
In dollars. In dollars.
in dollars, a payment of $500 per month to come from transient room tax.
$6,000.
$6,000 in total.
Phelan?
Yeah, sorry, I was just trying to understand, has it been calculated what the value is being provided to the city in terms of how many more people are being brought in, filling those rooms as a result of this festival? Like, can we equate the incremental to offset the amount that we would be providing for the festival?
I have asked a number of different sources that work with this, and it's very difficult for two reasons. Again, the total dollar of room tax that's coming in on a quarterly basis, and due to the fact that there's always been a lack of hotel space, a lack of space in Cottage Grove during Bohemia Mining Days. We have vendors that can't come because they can't get rooms. And we talk to a lot of people at the festival that have to stay outside the area. So it's very difficult to put a dollar value on that. I am trying to come up with some better numbers, but I don't have anything more concrete as of yet, but would be happy to keep working and provide that to you.
Sales, did you?
I was just curious of a total of $6,000. Is that money, since you're not having a festival this year, where is that going?
It goes for insurances. It goes to pay. I'm providing office rent now for the festival. We have to pay. There's software fees. Those kind of just day-to-day things it takes to run an office.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Joel, I was just going to suggest, just from a memory of Travel Lane County coming and presenting to the city on aggregated cell data for people moving in and out. That might be something that you could make the request to get data around the time of BMD. That's the closest thing to, that would tie into where are people coming from and how far and so on. I'm not sure.
That's a great idea. Great idea. Thank you.
You have anything else for the committee? Or is there any committee member that has another question? Well, thank you for your presentation, Joel.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Are there any other members online? Is there anyone online that wishes to address the board? Committee? Speak now or hold your peace. Is there any written documents received?
Haven't been included in the community promotions department, provided to you this evening or request.
We'll now then close the first public hearing at 7:09. And how's everyone feeling? Did anyone need a quick break for the bathroom or water? All right, well, let's get ready to roll.
Well, I wouldn't be the only one.
Well, good evening again. It's my understanding that your tradition has been to go through, starting with the general fund with each department. So that's what we'll do. And I'll just move to each department and ask whether or not you have any questions or input. And if not, we'll move on to future department.
We jump into that, kind of made my notes page by page. So I would like to suggest that the council revisit their goals and objectives, because these are done in 2021. We have a new city manager. We have some new people on city council. That was pre-COVID almost. And there's things in there, and this is what the whole budget and everything the city supports. That's your ruler that you use to decide if you're going to participate in it or not. And I'd like to see the council maybe revisit that. And there's some things in there that I think we change, refocus your measuring stick for the rest of your budget stuff. So that's my suggestion from the outside.
Can I ask a clarifying question? I don't understand what it is you're actually asking.
Revisiting your goals and objectives.
Oh, and
Because you use this then to decide what you're going to pay for,
okay,
what you're going to participate in. And some of these things are like entertainment. There's some things in it that if we're going to skinny things down a little bit, maybe we should revisit those goals and objectives that you're using for your guide.
not in this current year, but going forward.
Right.
Okay.
Going forward.
Going
forward. I have to say it now because if I do it next year, it'll be too late.
No, I'm with you. Thank you so much.
Now, so.
I think I've discussed with some of the council members. We are planning to do a city council retreat after the first of the year. And definitely want to start with the basics of, maybe we need to develop a city mission statement. And from that mission statement, we could develop the goals and objectives and priorities of the city. I want to work with a facilitator to do basically what you're saying. Because, a lot of this is either early or pre-COVID. And we're living in a different world now. So that's certainly my plan with the council going forward. Any other questions before we kind of jump into the general fund? Starting on page 31, we have the city council fund. Are there any questions at all on the city council's budget?
I'm apologizing. I normally get in to try to answer all these questions, but I've been working lately in the school, so I haven't. But on page 30, where it said federal grants for 969.
I asked that question earlier. It's in the development budget.
Just a moment. Are you is the question, what are the anticipated grants this year that are coming in revenue?
Yes, it seemed appreciably larger than
It is.
previous.
Let me get my comment opened up here a little bit so that I can see it better. So this year, that number consists of a Paul Run grant. It's in and out dollars, 750,000, and you'll see that in the Community Development Fund. Also a BLM trail grant for $15,000 and a FEMA reimbursement is also anticipated this year of about 303,100. It's a moving target. We don't know exactly how much FEMA is going to pay to us for the ice storm. In the general fund, it's only for those expenses that occurred in the general fund. And again, hopefully we receive the $303,100 to offset the expenses from this current fiscal year. We don't know when FEMA is going to reimburse us, if it's going to be next fiscal year, that's our hope, or how long it will take them to do that. So in the interim, what's proposed this fiscal year is to acquire a loan from the Storm Reserve Fund to the various departments that spent money on the ice storm. And then when the FEMA money comes in, to repay the Storm Reserve Fund. We will be taking that proposal to the city council for their approval because it will require an appropriation and probably a supplemental budget to do that. So those are the two grants that are in that fund of $750,000 for the Paul Run grant and a BLM trail grant for $15,000. It's a Paul Run.
One of my questions.
Refer to it.
Yeah, the Paul Burton grant was a grant that we applied for that would help improve the downtown Main Street. It's very similar to our facades grant, various different programs that we already got in place to assist improvement of the historic downtown core buildings, exteriors, those things.
Is this the grant that staff cannot advertise or say you need to grab this by people, but other people could say that's, and when will that be? Do we know if we received that or not yet?
We have not been notified that we'll be receiving the money, is my understanding.
It can also be used for things other than facades, like roofs and other general repairs. So. Building improvements.
Sorry, I hope I'm not messing this up again, but on the revenue, I had, and we were talking about the room tax, and it's showing 125,000 here. I never could get this from Richard. I never knew what went on with that. I know that the chamber gets 25%, but I don't know where the other 75% went and where that's going.
So in the community promotions, you're going to see an expenditure of $45,000. And those are monies that are being funneled to the chamber for that agreement that we have with them of 1%.
And that was 32 or 33 last year. It wasn't actually 45.
Correct. And we receive it, we pass it on directly to the Chamber of Commerce. So it's all based on the monies coming in from the state of Oregon. We no longer have Eugene collecting those for us. That was a change this last year. And it's more difficult for us to acquire those numbers because there are secrecy laws in place. And even I don't know which hotel or motel in town is paying their tax or not. We tried to do an audit with them and discovered that one of our businesses had actually paid and allocated on the form that it would go to this Eugene. State takes it for Eugene and then put it back, the onus back on the city to go and contact that operator and ask them to amend their return. So it's going to be a little bit of a struggle to know exactly what we can expect. And we'll be keeping a very close eye on what our revenue anticipation is versus what we're actually receiving.
So that's 25%. So where's the other 75%?
Okay, so it goes into the general fund to be used for purposes of, how do I want to say this? So you're going to see other rural tourism projects that are provided. We get tax money from Lane County as well that they share with us.
And that's the other question I had. I'll follow up with that one. But Richard was really adamant about the chamber we had to show in order to get that money that we were putting heads in beds and we were making a difference. And there's accountability for that money. So that other 75% then was just you guys wanted.
To answer your question, I would be glad to get the contract that's between the city and the chamber. And we'll review that and bring back the information on how that contract allocates that funding. I don't have it and I haven't looked at it in forever, if ever. So
I'm not sure we have the answer in front of us, but we'll be happy to get the information for you.
So it looks like there's a little bit, some more money on the table there for some of these local things to do tourism stuff. And then the other was the rural tourism marketing promotion, the RTMP money, and the county is projected 55,000 there that the city's going to get, but I didn't see a revenue line item for that 55K.
it's probably incorporated in with the other rural,
It's
the house. I can't even speak tonight, I'm sorry. The
room tax?
Room tax.
Oh, okay. Okay, so if it's rolled into that, then the chamber is getting 25% of that. Okay. These are questions that the board had and that Georgia had.
Like I said, I would really appreciate the opportunity to look at the actual contract and we can go over that together if you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask my 3 questions together? Because it's still kind of related to this.
I think at this point, if you just want to direct them towards the Sauerwein or the finance director Likens,
That's good.
you don't step on each other. So-
Yeah. There was, looks like an increase of about 270K for the state and local grants. And I was curious, and that's on page 30, what made that up? And then I don't know if I'm saying this right. It looks like opioid, but I'm sure I'm saying it wrong. What is the opioid settlement for 20K? Never heard of that.
You want to explain the opioid?
Sure.
Okay.
All cities, counties throughout the country received a share of the opioid settlements that, yeah, they were in the news. And that's what that revenue is from.
Okay.
Pharmaceutical companies paying
You
it.
know, pharmaceutical companies are paying it. Which means we're all paying it.
In the state and local grants line item, you have, using a parks master plan that is an in and out expense. You have a Department of Land Conservation Development Economic Opportunities Analysis, again, in and out, and an ODF, Oregon Department of Forestry tree grant, in and out. We identify these separate as federal and state because there's requirements with the federal that we report them separately, and that it exceeds $750,000 in grant funding. We have to do a single audit on those, which requires a lot more in-depth providing receipts, et cetera. So you'll see those. Sometimes a pass-through grant looks like it's a federal grant, but it's not. So it's very important to keep track of where that money is coming from and if the source is considered federal or not.
Thank you.
If I might add just a little bit more context, so we anticipate applying for technical assistance grant with DLCD, hopefully to support a park master plan. Because we're anticipating that, we're putting it in the budget, doesn't necessarily mean that we've gotten it. Just like the Department of Forestry, there's going to be an opportunity, supposedly they're going to release for grant opportunities. We're being encouraged by the Oregon Department of Forestry to apply for that. We originally were going to apply for a larger number to help prune all the trees in the city, but ice storm did that for us. So now we switched gears and we hope to apply for funding to grind stumps and to replant trees in the tree strip. So that's an anticipated grant that we're going to apply for. That's the amount we're going to apply for. If it's in the budget, then we don't have to do a budget adjustment later in the year if we get it. If we don't get it, we don't spend it. So it doesn't negatively impact us by including it, but it does tend to lead folks to believe we've got more money in certain areas that we didn't. Case in point, last year we applied for nearly 1.7 million in trail grants. So if you look at the Pathways and Trails Fund, you'll see that huge number. We weren't successful in any of the grants that we applied for.
Thank you. The follow-up question I had was the FEMA money that we're anticipating to get for the ice storm. Are we being made whole? Are we getting extra or are we under?
So at this point, we're a little unclear as to what the amount of reimbursement will be. The minimum will be 75%. We're being told it's probably going to be close to 75%. I don't think it's going to be. In the storm 2019, we actually received 100% of our expenses. So at the point, I'll be given a final report to council on the 28th so that we can remove the declaration of the emergency at that time. I'm guessing at this point, we're probably experiencing somewhere between 2.6 and 2.7 million in total expenditures. We have right at $2 million that we paid out of pocket for contracted assistance and help. The other 700,000 approximately is made up of our employee overtime, our equipment use, items that we have in the fleet that's budgeted and paid for throughout the year. I'm cautiously hopeful that that amount that we utilize in our own workforce will make up the 25% that we're not going to be reimbursed. And I'm just hoping that we will receive the unanticipated expense of this storm that was over and above what our crew could manage to handle. So I'm hoping that we're not gonna, that it'll be a wash in the end.
Thank you.
What is the South Lane School District revenue? It seems to be kind of hit and miss. Some years it's there, some years it's not. School District 30, yeah. The South Lane School District had been paying for a portion of a school resource officer. And in my discussions with Chief Chase, we do not anticipate that we will have a school resource officer in the building this year. And so it was not considered a revenue.
Any other questions on revenue? If not, we'll move on to the city council department budget. Are there any questions on the city council department budget?
Question. So I know the training, and I was looking at the education registration and travel and sustenance with all the departments, and it looked like the police departments is low compared to some of the others. I know you got continuing ed and research and stuff, and some of the departments have certifications that they have to maintain. But with the city council, then I know it's not certs or things they're trying to maintain, but who decides who goes to what class and how this money is dispersed? Is it the council? Do you guys decide who's going to what? Or does the city manager decide who's going to what?
Well, if you read the overview for the city council, the last sentence in it is, in addition, council members who serve on League of Oregon Cities, National League of Cities boards or committees. So if a council member serves on those national committees, they, under the policy as it's written, that's funded. And it's the same for all other council members. Middle paragraph, council members who represent the city in many areas on community activities. That's also what the money is expended for.
So if everybody on the city council got on the board, you're going to run out of money pretty fast, but okay. What would happen there? I just wonder how that process was, because we have to apply. If I get on a board, I have to ask for permission.
I was going to say, I don't know what the city's policy has been in the past. But what I have talked with several council members about is going forward, if a council member is going to serve on a national committee that directly impacts, the city, I think there's a huge benefit to that. There is a great deal of opportunities for additional funding, for additional information gathering, and other things that happen when you have a council member serving on one of these national committees. So there's real value to it. But what I've seen in other cities has been that you specifically budget for that if a council member is going to serve on one of those committees. And now I'll make up a number, $27,000. I don't know what it is. You come up with a good estimate of what it's going to cost for them to be able to fly to conferences, serve on those committees, pay for their hotels, pay for their registration. And that money is usually budgeted separately. It's my understanding that that's not been Cottage Grove's tradition, but it's certainly something that going forward, I'd like to see us take a look at.
Yeah, because this could get affecting the other people to go to.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's always going to be a reasonable estimate. Because, you can estimate that half the city council is going to go to League of Oregon Cities conference. Well, maybe more than half will go. So it's always going to be a bit of a moving target. But if it's something specific and specialized, like a council member serving on a national board, again, I think that's something that if you look at other cities, you'll see that they do budget for separately.
And my conversation with Manager Sauerwein this afternoon was he gave direction actually to the next time we come back, and the proposed would to be list travel and assistance at $13,000 and put in a line item for National League of Cities meetings at 5. So that you do have the ability to say, okay, here's what we've spent thus far. Where do we go from here? So
Yeah, make it a little more cleaner and everybody would know.
right, so I can bring him back that proposal at the next budget committee meeting.
I'd just like to say that, the council works for free. So in some respects, to have a little bonus to go off to some sort of government, maybe it's a good thing too.
Well, I'm not sure going to convince the taxpayers of that, but okay. But they can get on the council too, yeah. Yeah, you don't like it.
But let me be really clear about this. There is a huge value to having council members serve on regional boards and commissions and national boards and commissions. And one of the things I tell all council members is never give up your seat at the table. If you go to a lot of regional transportation committee meetings, you may spend a lot of time hearing in-depth discussions about garbage transfer stations that don't affect Cottage Grove. But when the discussion turns to, accesses off of I-5 and how that impacts cities that are essentially bifurcated, I love that word, by I-5, that's the point you want your seat at the table. And that may be a local, regional, or even a national meeting where that takes place. So there's a huge value to having our council members participate regionally and nationally.
I'd like us to start applying for some the scholarships. Because being on the Oregon Mayors Association Committee, I have realized that there's a lot of scholarships out there. And I would like our city to give, especially for the national conferences that can be pretty pricey to our city, and especially in a budget crunch, to apply would be.
That's true. And it's not just for elected officials. A lot of times when we have employees that attend conferences, our insurance carrier actually will provide scholarships for people to attend.
We could include that in the narrative if you'd like to see some language around that we would encourage council members to apply for scholarships for any conference that they want to attend.
That would be great.
With regard to the meeting expense, what's the explanation for it increasing 5K?
That $5,000 increase is for a city council retreat that I mentioned earlier. After the first of the year, pay for a facilitator if we have to get a facility or whatever to have a retreat. So it's a number. I think it's a reasonable estimate that
if we get goals out of it. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions on the city council budget? If not, we'll move on to the city manager.
I'd like to make one comment that the FTEs that are listed here have not been reconciled. We were making changes to personnel beginning on this previous Monday, and a budget document was required to go out so that we could hold this meeting this evening. So at your next meeting, we will have these FTEs reconciled with what the changes were in the actual budget sheets as well as in the organizational charts. Right now, I will guarantee you that they are not accurate. But we will bring forth the accurate information before it's adopted. I apologize for that, but we ran out of time.
So any questions on the city manager budget?
The revision process, I noticed the Youth Advisory Council I don't know if that's still slated to continue or not.
My intention is to restart the Youth Advisory Council for the 2024-2025 school year. The current school year with multiple city managers was a bit of a mulligan. But I definitely am hoping that we can restart that program next school year.
Good.
I've received several constituent inquiries as to the status that I referred to the city managers. Strong support in the community, and they've done tremendous things here.
We just hired a graduate of the program.
I think there's a present past member in the room, isn't there, Cameron?
Look how he turned out.
Second thought.
Any other questions on the city manager's budget? If not, okay, good.
So the city assistant to the city manager is being eliminated?
That position is not being budgeted in the next year's budget. No. Any other questions? We'll move on to finance.
So I'm going to just jump in. I'd asked earlier about the finance clerk, and it sounds like the FTE in the front page isn't correct.
Not been reconciled yet either, sorry. So in this particular department, we have not put in the payroll HR specialist. It's into a manager, and you'll find that in another department within the budget document. Also, I would suggest under contractual services, there's an increase in that. We are tending to have payroll come back underneath finance, and we are looking to outsource payroll at a cost of about $20,000. Estimated at this point. Should have to go out for an RFP. Perhaps, at least follow our budgeting or contractual services rules, purchasing board rules, and go forth from there.
And understand that contracting out the payroll is a significant savings for the city. We had, the council created a assistant position in the Human Resources Department for last year. The position was scheduled to sunset at the end of this fiscal year, which it has. By eliminating that position and then contracting out for payroll is a significant savings. Put it in context, we're paying less for payroll than we would for an employee's medical insurance.
I guess a concern around succession planning, around how difficult it is to find people to stick around in payroll, especially city. And how is this budget addressing that? Is the removing of payroll sufficient to lift the burden to streamline? And then are we looking to raise up a finance clerk, or how, into Bert's probably not going to stick around forever in this position is what I'm trying to say. What are we doing about that?
I'll jump in the way you jumped in. Succession planning in our finance department is a high priority. There is probably half a dozen cities in the state of Oregon right now that are looking for finance directors. So it would behoove us to move to promote someone from within. I don't think they're ever going to get up to Bert's level of skills. I don't think anybody's going to get up to Bert's level of skills. But, you know, that's definitely a concern that we have of being able to move folks up rather than trying to hire from outside, just because it's a very difficult position to fill.
So conceptually, you know, and the reason why I was asking about the goal, not to reduce services. I'm of the opinion that we might have to address a reduction in certain services to bolster the core of the organization. And there's a couple of departments that might warrant additional staffing, and just in my understanding of that, finance would be one, potentially HR. We're going to get to these other departments, I think, as we go. And I appreciated some of the changes seen in the public works division of duties, but I'll just vocalizing that I'm bearing that in mind as we go through this. Just to love to hear that candid. I think you're right. Who better to train somebody than the best in the biz?
You're absolutely right. Those are some of the hard decisions that we're going to be making going forward. We don't want to be in the situation again.
I would offer to you, my most senior person in the finance department has been with us for 8 years, 3 years doing utility billing. And I think Jessica hasn't been here 8 years, excuse me. The court clerk, the part-time court clerk has been here with us 8 to 9 years now. Everyone other than Jessica, who's been with us 3 going on 4, is under a 2-year tenure. So we don't have a succession plan to answer your question exactly. I don't have anyone today that would be prepared to step in and be your finance director. So my guess is it's going to be an outside search when you decide to do that.
Bird thinks she's retiring. She's mistaken. You're here for life.
It's a prison sentence.
Any other questions on finance? Moving on then to community services.
I guess I just vocalized something. And as I'm learning in council and other things, just vocalizing things aren't really going to get anything done. Can we come back on Thursday with a suggestion or a modification that we can grapple with that would help address these departments, or how? I'm not quite sure how we go about that.
Yes. Clarifying question. I guess I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, perhaps putting in more FTE. I don't know. That's not my job to make a suggestion on how many FTE. But what I'm asking is, how do we better ensure the services that come out of the finance department are able to be borne and not overstress the staff, and not be late on things and put other things at risk in the future, but to better staff to provide a better service out of this finance department.
So I guess my comment would be, isn't that in the budget they've proposed to us? I mean, I certainly wouldn't be adding folks to this budget. In fact, if I were to make decisions, it would actually be about cutting positions.
Great, let's have that discussion.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to garner information. Where are we? Are we happy with this? Is this providing better service than we've had previously? Because if you're coming from the position that we should cut, then I would take it that you assume that we're over serving in this department. We could cut from it because we have room to cut.
I'm not talking about finance. I'm talking about the city as a whole. We, in our general fund especially, we do not have the ending numbers that I want to see. For long-term fiscal health, we are not where I believe we need to be. And so that means we have to start looking at a priority. And this goes back to Danny's comments about prioritizing what we're going to do as a city. And for me, public safety is going to be number one. The other required things we have to do, community development, we're required to do. There are a number of other things. Then we have to look at services that we may or may not be looking at. there was, this is in enterprise funds, but we're adding staffing in the golf course. And my question earlier was like, why in the world will we be having staffing? Well, apparently they're making a lot of revenue and need the extra staff to make that revenue. Well, that makes perfect sense to me. But are there departments, as an example, and I'm not suggesting anything, the library for many, many years had many fewer employees, and I'm not suggesting that there are any changes that should be made, but if there were areas, that would be one of the areas I would be looking at.
And I agree with you on that. That's in my mind about, are we sacrificing, these core things for the internal ability to service the residents, which I think finance, it serves every other department. HR serves every other department in a way that has never been done in the last 20 some odd years. And we're coming up to the times, we have to evaluate what is absolutely a necessity going forward versus not. So I don't know where to start that conversation. So I guess we just did, but.
Right. And see, and I guess we've, in the past, HR was done by the city manager. Obviously, we've grown and things have changed. And oh my God, just following it up, my job, is a challenge. So I get it, but I would be reluctant to add another HR person.
And we could agree that probably didn't pan out very well.
Well, I guess but it's a debate of, that's a risk versus reward discussion. Is our budget in line and can we afford that? And I apologize, we're kind of digressing here.
Oh, let me just say this. I've talked with a couple of council members about this, and, Bert and I and the department directors are committed during this next year to having this discussion internally and coming back with recommendations to the council. I doubt that we're going to be in a position to make a recommendation between now and next Thursday. But it's certainly something I've heard from council members. I understand what you're saying. And as I said earlier, I don't want to do this again. I don't want us to be back in the same position financially a year from now. And so over the course of the next year, there's going to be some hard conversations we're going to need to have. Now, budgeting doesn't need to happen just in May. It's something we can talk about at a retreat. It's something we can talk about at work sessions throughout the course of the year. And I think we really need to do that.
It seems like it sounds like it might be tough to make substantive changes at this point anyway. It's not a conversation we've been having for the past year about a very large and complex mechanism such as the city. Okay. We're kind of where we're at this stage, largely. I can't imagine us in the next couple of nights making a major change to our direction. It seems like a time of tightening the belt and reassessing and going forward with new people and a new outlook, perhaps. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it is. And, please understand that this was a tough budget for staff to put together. This took some time and effort and, a couple of long weekends to be able to put together a budget that, feels we're being intellectually honest when we say we're bringing you a balanced budget. But when we started out, $1 million in the hole.
Is there a roster of any key positions for which there's no retirement dates?
I'm sorry,
Is there a roster of key positions in the city with known retirement dates?
roster without retirement dates?
Known retirement dates?
With no retirement dates? I guess the short answer would be no. Because, people can retire at any age. So,
I mean, just state it.
To say,
Instead,
no one has stated in the next 3 months that they will be retiring.
I was going to say, I try to give you a straight answer. I'll be 62 this month. I don't plan to retire until, I'm at least in my 80s before I figure out what it is I really want to be when I grow up. It's hard to gauge things like that.
Understood. I just didn't know if there were any known ones that are already need to be accounted for.
Not this time.
Okay, thank you.
So
I got a question. I'm not sure the information to talk from. The year to date, is that are we missing the year to date? And is that the actual on the performance measurements for the community services? Which is
It's 43.
43.
I think maybe that wasn't updated and
Those numbers would be your,
take a look at it and compare it to last year's
we're
number.
missing one.
It
there.
got cut off when it was embedded into the Word document.
Okay,
So I will be glad to bring that back to you updated.
because that's a really important number for us to see what's being done there and how that's working. And so, okay, thank you.
I think that's a Microsoft issue.
That'd be a Danny issue, but we can do this one. So
I guess, are we moving on then to community services? Any other questions at all?
I'm a little bit unsettled. I mean, there's a few ways that we could address why we're here tonight. So Stan, I think you're trying to home in on this. We can either look at this as this is the best. We're just familiarizing ourselves with it now to make changes next year. Or we could exercise our discretion to come to consensus on a suggestion to bring to the council for changes this year. I think I came into this thinking that that was a possibility, that there might be things that we could collectively say, hey, we really appreciate about, the work that went into this, but we do want to steer some changes into this. I guess I'm just not ready to abandon that possibility. And would like to make sure, I would like to see if we're on the same page about what we're doing here tonight.
Same page.
Can I suggest that maybe we go through the budget and then at the end, we can kind of recap and go back and, once we have a better understanding, excuse me, of all the different nuances, then we can have a little better discussion, I think, around, what we're talking about. I've gone both ways. I've actually gone to going into this of really suggesting cutting to the bone, because I'll be honest, I'm doing that at my agency. I'm cutting to the bone because I have to. But I also recognize that we do have some changes and maybe that's appropriate to wait with a balanced budget and go forward. So I'm on the fence on that. I haven't decided kind of where I'm at, but I am really worried about the ending numbers in this budget. So I'm with you. I'm just not sure where I want to land on this. But like I said, I think if we could just go through the whole thing, then we can come back, circle back to that.
Yeah. As long as we don't have one of those throw a motion out there and everyone pass it, then it all settle right down.
Okay. Yeah.
So, community services. Any questions on the community services budget?
We have a summary about what's going on. Can you give us just a rundown on the day-to-day? What's going on? What, allocation of time being spent in this department? What is this a community being served as a whole? Is there a focus kind of primarily $309,000 budget? What is the city getting for this?
Rather than shooting from the hip, I would prefer to talk with the folks who work in the department and maybe have them give you a presentation, either at the budget committee or at the council. One of the things that, again, I've talked with council members about going forward is we will start having department reports at least twice a year, if not quarterly. Again, it's my understanding that's something that hasn't been done, recently in Cottage Grove. But it's an opportunity for you to hear exactly that from the folks who work in each department, what their day is like. Often they're in front of you speaking about specific projects or whatever, but you don't get the kind of global picture of what's happening in individual departments. So your pleasure. I said I can certainly we can certainly put together a report with the folks in that department and bring it back to a council meeting. Or I can ask them to give you information here at the budget committee meeting.
Certainly before the budget committee or the budget meeting to pass the budget would be nice.
This area, I'm definitely unsure what a lot of these people do. And so that would be of interest to me. For sure.
I was concerned when I saw that they were going to paint the bathrooms. I thought maybe those facilities, but as their goals and stuff, I didn't think that this staff there was going to do, but that's on their 24, 25 goals to paint the restrooms at the community center.
So there's been a, request. I moved up to the podium because I really can't hear the conversation at all, and people behind me are saying the same thing. So if I really could, online it's popping up, horrible audio because your voices are not being picked up. So I'm sorry to be the squeaky wheel, but I really need you guys to project so that we can have an accurate reporting of the minutes and what's happening here this evening. And maybe Thursday I'll use the speakers. Thank you.
It's your teacher voice.
You're also employees.
So what I'm hearing then is a request from the committee for the folks in community services to give a report at the Thursday budget committee meeting about what their operations are so that the committee can better understand this department. Is that what I'm hearing?
I do have a general question about this section. I'm not really sure what all is involved in this either. But I was curious, is there a place where we can go to see the specific allocation to the unhoused, since that is such a hot topic? Is there a separate fund or somewhere we can go to see the breakdown of what's being allocated to those folks? And if not, can I propose that there be one that's split apart so we can specifically see some numbers associated to that?
I think that's a great idea, because quite frankly, no, there isn't a page that I can point you to.
Is it maybe within community services or it's spread out?
We could put it there. But understand that it falls under things like maintenance, it falls under, utilities, it falls under, a number of different places there, but, that was never something that was constructed when the homeless camps were first opened. So I will be honest, it's something I've struggled with in just trying to construct, a spreadsheet showing this is what, money has been spent over the last 3 years each year, and what property was purchased, what contracts were signed. Going backwards and trying to construct that has been a bit of a frustrating process.
Or is there a way to do that, like put a project name, number on it so that we can keep track going forward on everything to do with homelessness projects?
Simple answer is yes. It will capture your hard costs. We would have to, if you're wanting personnel costs, that sort of thing, we would have to create a code that the person doing the work would have to put their time down in, but then that would also fall into the ability to provide it with the project management report.
So a project management report with a specific code.
Right, so anyone that is doing anything with purchasing for the unhoused needs would be able to allocate that, and we would have a report on it out of our software system.
I would love to see that moving forward. I think it would be great for the community transparency for the budget committee moving forward. So we know.
So something like how much time the coordinator or assistant might be spending.
Could be tracked.
Regardless of it, we could hear that on Thursday then.
Not on Thursday.
Let's be clear.
Can we ask for a rough idea of how much time they're spending?
Yes, you can. Simple answer is
Difficult we do immediately, the impossible we farm out.
We have to have code going forward to be able to track.
Anecdotally.
Yes, not
Yeah.
precise.
Yeah.
Well, I'd assume that just seemed like at least at one time that Teresa was doing a lot of work. You can.
Yeah, let me be really clear. We can give you the hard cost. You know, the city has a contract with a nonprofit to manage the 99 camp. We can give you those hard costs. What I cannot tell you is that the Public Works Department spent 17.5 hours in the month of April helping clean up. And those are the numbers we're trying to get to. But as we sit here today, I can't give you those numbers.
Even gravel or,
Yeah, I say, or materials, or, those sort of things. And this is what Bert's talking about, is creating a space in our software where we can start logging that sort of stuff in. But it's going to be a process, and, I don't want to overpromise. I think probably going forward, meaning, next fiscal year, we can start tracking those things a lot better. I mean, over the next month, we can kind of get the system up and running. And then in the next fiscal year, be able to, I just want to bring you data that I'm not happy with and that I'm not satisfied with. And to get to that point, I think we're going to take some time to set up the books to do it.
do you mean like July?
Yeah, I would say beginning of the next fiscal year in July with this budget we're working on.
So that could reflect water, electricity, bucks, dumpsters, all that kind of
As
stuff.
long as it's coded at the time that it's turned into finance to go towards that project, I can capture it in that project management report. But staff will have to be educated.
Have to train people
to code that appropriately. We do it in other facets of finance and expenditures. So if we're tracking a project like the ice storm, employees knew to code their invoices ice storm, and we were putting it in our accounts payable system as that, and then I can project out a report exactly on who we paid, how much we paid, and what the total is. But it doesn't capture personnel, but we can track personnel through the employee putting down the time on their timesheet when they enter it under a code or unhoused. Will be an education process to that employee and that they need to do that.
Hey, I'm sorry, but I'm not really clear. Are we talking about homeless expenditures? Or are we talking about the homeless camp out on 99?
It's actually in here.
That was.
What's in this,
The contract for 99 is in this one. Yes, it's ending now.
Okay, because, Richard was very clear on what the city was doing, but the homeless camp out on 99 and everything, and I just don't recall that being a line item in the budget, but it has been all over Facebook about the power bill.
The power bill, to jump in, the power bill for the North 12th site is what? I believe
That is,
there was a
taxpayer.
and that energy bill was being paid out of the maintenance fund and maintenance fund and general fund. That's one portion of it. And if we were to track that with a project management code, we would have it all collected out of any fund, any line item that would be accessible on a daily basis. We would know where you were and what you had spent on unhoused needs.
If I might, we have a second tool that we can use to track expenditures. It's iWorks is a program that we have, and we've done pretty successful. In many cases, we use it a lot for the ice storm. It's a supplement to our spring break setting up project. So I have to be honest with you, the real challenge is getting the employees to take the time to do it. There's so much work to do out there. To have them cut out of their day 30 minutes to 45 minutes early so they can sit in front of a computer and add numbers when there's things that need to be done, grass to mow, various different things, is a challenge. If we want to really track those numbers, we're going to have to figure out a system to make that happen as we move forward. But iWorks, we can put in invoices, and which employee is in there. We have their employee costs, their full blower costs in iWorks, and we can push a button and come up with a project cost. It's been very good from the mechanic in the shop. Both mechanics use it religiously, and we can come very close on what vehicle is being costs are attributed to each vehicle and everything. So we have another tool that we can all work with Mr. Sauerwein and Bert and come up with the appropriate tool as directed by council.
They need to know that it's imperative that it's that they track everything, because there's always a good shot that we get a reimbursement and they cost the city if they don't track it. Yeah, so.
And that's the message it's been for the ice storm. Every single expenditure has to be accounted so that we can claw back every dime that we possibly can.
Right, exactly. It's just data entry.
So are we thinking, well, a couple of questions with this project? Is iWorks and the Springbrook software for coding, is that accessible to all departments for entry? So with the police department, would the police department be able to do that?
The payable system happens in finance with the accounts payable specialist. So the invoice is coded, say, from an admin assistant in Public Works, or the supervisor that made that purchase is coding it. So we could certainly do an education process on how important this is and what we expect to have happening.
No, anytime there's a reimbursement like you're talking about, the motivation is there, right? The strictness to it has to be adhered to be able to get those. Run into this with my employees all the time. That overhead of putting the entry in is taken away from the work, and what's the value? And they don't see any benefit from it. And does the organization really see any benefit from it? And so we say, estimate best judgment. And then that's the caveat to it. That doesn't work with probably, reimbursement at the federal level, but for things that are just stats that we're trying to make decisions on, it does work. So, I would suggest that if there's, I don't know if there's stuff that we can actually get back, or if that puts us in a better grant position for addressing homelessness. If we actually do have all those costs accounted for, I'm not hearing, I imagine that's a possibility, but to just be discretionary about the mode of data gathering.
Oh, look, there's a real value to having the data. And I can say that because I've been trying to go backwards and recreate the last 3 years, and it sure would have been nice to have had that data available. And obviously the council is wanting something that they can, use as a, data-driven decision-making tool going forward. So we will certainly try to create that. Like I said, kind of with the goal to have something up and running at the start of the next fiscal year.
Just to be clear, you're talking about data related to the allocation of time for personnel.
Well, I'd also want to put in purchases for, whether it's purchasing rock or whether contracts, whatever. Get all of that data in one place, in one box, as much as we possibly can.
I guess I was asking more broadly. As a city, we don't have a mechanism for closely accounting for personnel time spent on any.
Not directly, no. It's just, a lot of times if an employee is working, in one department, they may do work in another department, you want to be able to allocate that on a timesheet or something. But generally speaking, I don't do a timesheet showing what I'm doing every hour. I'm not an attorney. I don't have to bill out my clients.
Just to add to that, though, we do have the ability to track based on the class code that they're working under for workers' comp. So like law enforcement, they're all coded to a certain line. Or if we have a grant that we're working on, we do use different pay codes for them. So we do have the ability to split them out. Like if a supervisor's out in the field, there's a different code for that versus in office clerical. We do have the ability in our current system to do that, but we are eliminating a full payroll technician support person in the next fiscal year. So if we transfer to a new software system, there could be some hiccups with that, since there's not a human to facilitate payroll anymore. That's going to be outsourced through finance. So things could change. You know, we can do that with our current system right now and how we're processing payroll, but in the next fiscal year, they're gonna be outsourcing to a third-party company, and so I don't know, I'm sure that they have the technical ability, but there probably will be a little bit of a time frame where we're in between, I assume.
So I kind of just going back to the bigger picture, trying to understand what we're trying to do, which is, kind of without an in-depth breakdown of personnel, with an organization that is so people heavy, then how could we make substantive impact on what's going on without in-depth data of how everyone's spending their time, I guess? Does that make sense to anyone else?
With what Faye indicated with the iWorks program, I think we are utilizing that now. And so we would pick a system and use it, right?
Okay.
So I think we need to have more discussion at a staff level of how we go forward to be able to track the things that everyone wants to see for the unhoused and how we're spending the money on that. It's doable. It's just how do we approach it?
So given everything we do, just needs an audit, and how are people spending their time?
I think from a taxpayer point of view, they want to know what they're paying for. And when you see an HR payroll position eliminated and then a 4% payroll increase for certain employees, but then we can't track what we're spending in other departments, that just enters questions that you really shouldn't have to have. You should have clear, concise answers of where their money's going.
Chair, if I may, what I'm hearing is this budget committee as a policy level, we would like to see items tracked with different program codes. And then the staff will figure out how to do that and nuances of the systems we have. And what we're asking that I hear consensus on is July 1. Let's track those things. So whatever it takes to get it set up. So starting July 1, we can start tracking. So that's what we're asking.
The data entry clerk or, it collates the expenditures in one person.
I mean, the details, we don't need to do the details.
Yeah.
So, and there was a comment about we're cutting HR. We have not cut HR. We added a temporary person through the last year to help us with an increase in hiring in the police department, but that temporary position is ending. So it's not that we've eliminated a position, we have just ended a temporary
We're
position.
still outsourcing HR payroll. It's not going to be done with an in-house.
Payroll is moving back into the finance department, although it's going to be through a contractor because
But then that was
then hiring an employee to do it. I just want to make sure we're clear
okay.
on what we're talking about.
Okay, that wasn't clear before.
I don't miss anything, but I'm gonna go to the restroom. John, you wanna go too?
Was that break earlier? Sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing the far side of the table.
Gonna take a break?
This might be a good point to do that.
I don't think we had a choice in the matter.
Right out, didn't I?
Who's gonna be? Maybe.
You've been through work.
Charlene, I hope I'm not crabby. I have horrible.
Oh, I'm sorry, what?
I said, I hope I'm not being crabby. I have a horrible.
It's fine. No, I thought that they said that they should eliminate the position. Oh, they didn't make that clear.
So, yeah, so.
We mentioned that earlier, but it was kind of not.
Whatever was seen, it's here.
It used to be that HR had a little item in the general fund, and then it had a bunch of little items in the enterprise funds, and they moved it all into the general fund. And its own department. Yeah, budgets too. But it didn't change the FTE other than a temporary person.
It felt lost. Actually, HR is like stated an HR position because she had help for a year and now she doesn't.
Was that the position? We added something last year. That was very
And it sounds like.
Yeah.
The chair takes me.
I'm familiar with this. I don't.
Apologizing if I'm crabby about it. It's life. To be figured.
But if we need to make cuts, we need to make cuts. I mean, it's happening everywhere and happening at my job and we're all doing extra work and stuff just because we have a hiring freeze or cost of living increase is not happening.
And what do you do again?
I'm a log accountant at Starfire. So when I hear things about employees can't put in a receipt, keep track of 8,000 logs. So it's just like, okay, that's not.
And I run, we track every minute. If folks aren't in one, like my pantry manager is one of the few people, all he does is in one cost center, so he's one of the few people that does track.
Right.
Of my, including.
So economically, in my world, the price of logs have significantly, the cost of processing them is up. We're building a new building, we're really breaking.
It's beautiful.
I'm glad because you have to charge admission to pay. No, right now we're breaking even and so it's just, I went conversation with a great year this year and so. And then what happens when the cost of logs drops, people stop shipping them to the mills. I had a month ago, any given day, 40 loads of logs coming in. I had 8 loads yesterday.
You're still using the bigger ones.
Yeah, don't take anything under.
Yeah. Went down.
They did, and in the new law passed the first year, there's been at least 4 mills that have shut down or gone to land plans because of the restrictions on logging their own.
Is it you guys, Bo, Susan Groves?
And it affects everybody, but
Still going.
Weyerhaeuser, yeah, Weyerhaeuser. There's been a rumor about Roseburg, their mills, will be.
Forest plan, they wanted to, or was it another company? I'm trying to remember one of those companies that.
Right.
Mentioning the new law. Forest.
There was a mill down in below Sutherland that just shut down and we actually hired quite a few of their people. We got some good skilled workers out of that.
Like another 10 guy from your children.
Get it up here,
Like a different landscape. than-
Halloween candle, and so and we were in school, the revenue from the tax dollars, we had funds coming into places at schools and stuff. We're no limit.
Give you all? Paper bags, so we can
Oh my God.
get.
I
Complicated.
think people don't forgot to roll it back in the like days. I used to be parade.
Healthy sex, and then the.
You know, it's not a festival to
Remember
to draw in people from states and.
Responsible.
Right.
You know.
Not good and, you know,
Oh,
they're great, because not, you gotta.
Need to go home. So I mean, holy.
Thank you.
That and have
Is Crystal on the moratorium?
Yeah.
Oh, see.
Put it out there. Yeah. I worked in public and I had to drive home. No.
No. Well, water, not city water, then they're like those buildings.
I don't think it's water production. I think it's water that they have.
Oh,
And I believe it's only on the west side.
right.
Because the east side, remember, has its own
Yes, and
system.
then by just Bell's building. Yeah, my family lives in Crestwell there. I'm too thrilled about it, exactly.
Oh, no, that's okay. No, I'm.
And jobs. And
That's all I get there.
people that-
Yum bowl. Oh, that's good. Their beans and rice bowls like good, amazing.
Yeah.
And it tastes amazing.
There you go.
That's a great.
And to escape it. And
Get through about half one of those at lunch.
You just do the best you can.
So Chair, you would ask for all of it. As we go. It's so trying
No, I can see
to
that.
do that, got to balance this with.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, everybody is returned. Shall we pick up the the plowshare and move forward.
And last we left our story, community services is kind of being set aside. We're being asked to give a presentation by the community services department folks at your Thursday meeting. That, yeah. Next up is community promotions. Any comments or questions on community promotions?
Yeah, here we go. I love this community. And so this would be one of the first areas, though, that if we're on the chopping block of stuff, I'm taking a heavy look at this. One of the leading questions I think Mr. Soulsby asked earlier was the rural tourism projects. I didn't know what that was. Or the kind of the accounting, what are we getting for 35,000? Maybe I'll just list these out and they can be addressed as the community pool support. I'm thinking about this, and this gets to the data thing. So hold. What are we getting for that? Do we have the data? I mean, we had presentations in the past where there was the number of kids trained above and beyond what the school district was doing. My thought was, well, could we accomplish the same amount or more in a different mechanism for less money? Could we offer a scholarship program to kids that can't afford it? We have a budget philosophy that, you know, we're violating by transferring money to the school district and that's sent practical, any general city service, which is of higher level or benefits specific recipients, should be supported by user fees designed to recover the cost from such recipients. So, and I know that we just had a presentation from the pool that was like, no, this is heavily subsidized. This is what the cost would be if it's actually covered by. So it got me thinking, maybe it's time to have that conversation again. And not just have blanket 75 or the ask was 90 now to supplement, but to just at least to relook at that, whether it happens, you know, now, later. My understanding is the Eugene Symphony line is in there in case we don't get donations. So just, I guess, encouragement of either eliminating that line item or doing everything possible to, I don't even know how much time it's worth to do that if we're really heavily cut. So, but that would be my questions. Those are the big ticket ones. I can see the benefit to the chamber, but yeah, rural tourism projects, I don't know anything about.
I'll give you what limited knowledge I know about the rural tourism projects. I believe that's the advertising that we spend with Travel Lane County. And magazines and airport magazines and pretty substantial outreach. And they've produced videos, they've produced other pretty quality documents that are promoting Cottage Grove through multiple different mediums. So that's where those resources are going.
I tell you, last year it was, I got some of these numbers from Bert. It was $18,000 went to chamber brochures. I know they did a commercial for the Eugene Airport promoting tourism. Those are the only two I can remember off the top of my head.
We had some videos for the bridges and touring stuff was done with some of those funds too, through the chamber.
Right, and as far as the pool goes, Bert, maybe you can refresh my memory, but as I recall, when they very first came to ask for money, it was $25,000 one-time ask. And then it went to 50,000 and then 75, and now this year they're asking for 90. And correct?
I believe you're correct. I want to say that it was a one-time purchase, but I'd have to look back in records to determine when that was. But I know it was a topic of discussion like every other year in community promotions of what do we want to do? And we thought this was going to be one time, and now we're doing it again, but it's been in the budget for several years. But I would think that we could look at this and then obviously give some notice to the school district and talk to them about where we're at, where they're at, and maybe look heavily at reducing this, even though it may be put in the budget, that we could address it with the school district at some point this year.
So has any thought gone, is there some way to do where the room tax and the rural tourism marketing promotion monies that come in, where that's the money that you use for these things, so that we're not using, so the citizens don't see us using tax dollars to fund the farmer's market or the chamber or those things, and we're actually using funds that came in and going right back out. So if we have $150,000 there, that gets divvied up in this section instead of going to the general fund. Can we do something like that so that it's a little more?
Well, it's gonna be in the general fund.
Okay.
It could be better identified going forward, that we would identify the money in, money out, and have it separated so that you are seeing like I had before, grant money's in, grant money's out. This, I don't believe at this point is actually a grant any longer. It used to be that we had to apply to Lane County and they would authorize what we projected to do, and then we would receive the funds. Now it comes, and I need to do more research on where it's coming from, how it's determined, how much we get, and what the allowable expenses are. So I'll bring that back to you at your next meeting if I can acquire that between now and Thursday.
These things all look like promotional things, for the community. So it'd be using tourism stuff, people come into town, and these are the things that they come to town for. So it kind of makes sense instead of us using tax dollars for that, or the appearance that we are. Anyway, that's my thought.
I would share too, just on the Eugene Symphony, Sean and I, project coordinator, has sent out an extensive list to asking for donations. I mean, I believe it's close to 100 letters that were sent out, and they're doing follow-up phone calls now and getting pretty decent success. Very confident that they're not going to be much, if any, general fund needed to support the symphony this year. So I would hesitate to cut it out, but that would be some money that potentially could be carried forward into next year's budget.
And I'm sorry, can I jump in? We need this to appropriate those funds, right? I mean, even if we get all of that revenue, we have to have a line item.
You still have to pay
corresponding expenditure.
Be the donation.
So we wouldn't want to just cut it, even because it may all be donations, and so we wouldn't want to.
You have to have the expenditure out as well. The appropriation needs to be made if you're going to have a symphony come to town. It's how are you raising the funds to pay for that symphony? Are we using transit tax dollars, or are we relying only on donations? And if you don't receive all the donations, we don't hold it that year and you carry it over to the next year. But yes, you have to budget the appropriation to pay for it if you plan on having that symphony come.
Thank you.
So who manages and prioritizes the tourism funds? The rural projects, is that?
In the past, it's been recommendations from the city manager in this particular department. And then it's always a point of discussion at your budget committee meetings. And so we've had presentations, you make a determination of, we want to include this, we don't want to include that, and off we go.
But it was largely through Travel Lane County this time, am I hearing?
Yes.
And have they been using like targeted cell phone data to market us in specific communities and so I thought they had, yes?
Yes, it's my understanding.
Okay.
We're doing a lot with phone data.
Creepy.
Well, I don't doubt it. I'd love to hear about it.
Travel Lane County does come.
Yeah.
Give reports.
Before we came and give a presentation.
Recently.
So I recall that.
That's where we learned that 40% of the tourists that come to Cottage Grove go to the golf course.
That's right.
With golf,
We'll get there.
Can I just ask a general, I don't see it in the summary, like the overview, but is there a general philosophy about this budget that you're gonna sometimes help jumpstart organizations? And then they shouldn't need the funding anymore? Or is there some expectation that some of these are gonna be just funded from here on out?
don't think there has been in the past, but that's certainly something that I've seen other cities do, is they set a list of priorities and for how they're going to expend their funds, for community promotions. And, one of the priorities often is something that's going to jumpstart a new, whatever it is, that's going to bring more people to town. Whether it's, golf event or whatever. And that there also was a philosophy that, we'll fund a program for 2 or 3 years, get it going, and then we'll take a hard look at it and decide whether or not it's something that we want to continue to fund. I haven't seen that level of analysis done here, but that's what you're asking is not an unusual, thing to do.
I would share it. Mr. Starwine's not familiar with this, but we did just that for Looking Glass. We did a one-time support so that they could purchase and remodel their building that they're working on over here off of Whitaker. We also did that with the Slaptown BMX, one-time $10,000 grant to catapult them to get their track design and
Excellent.
move them forward. So yes, we have done one-time support. We're trying to see something happen.
Okay, do we know, are we able to mark which ones are supposed to be one-time support or?
Well, in our minutes from last year, we talked about the farmer's market was one of them that we were helping get them going. And then I thought we were trying to wean them off of that. So it sounds like they still need funding. So that's kind of.
They're profitable for the last 3 years. So I think that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, so I'm of the notion we need to cut some things. That's probably something we need to do. And I also had a question about the Singing Creek Education Center. I was told that they're no longer here, based in Cottage Grove. And so we're funding that $2,000. So anybody know?
We've received a letter of request, so it's looking for that.
And they do have an extensive summer program scheduled for utilization of Prospector Park and summer program for their.
Yeah. Listed in the library, coordinating with the library as well in that summary for the library fund.
Most likely be able to see which ones were expected to be one time as they fall off the budget. So the $5,000 for the La Familia support was a one-time request. The $10,000 was a one-time request. Same with Friends of the Cottage Carousel. They were going to do feasibility study on where to put this thing as well. And that was a $5,000 request not to be continued on. But then you'll see that that was the intent, and then they come back again and it may have been renewed. So then you'll have more history on the left side of your page.
Mm-hmm. So is this our opportunity to make the suggestions?
Absolutely.
So I think I'm not still understanding the Eugene Symphony. So is that the expected expenditure to have the symphony? So it's going to be 25,000 this year?
Just looking at past costs, the symphony is about $25,000 for the symphony itself. There's about another $4,000 in additional costs, things like getting bleachers, porta potties. We've got to get a RV for the conductor to work out of. So, the total budget for the project should be around $29,000. And to Faye's comment, the staff is definitely doing everything they can and pulling out all the stops to try to get sponsorships for it.
Okay. I mean, for me, that was wonderful last year. It was really cool to go there and experience that. But I'm not sure what is the value, if we can quantify it, of having them, compared to all of the other things that have to be prioritized and paid for.
True, baby.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's a tourism draw, because anybody that supports the symphony, no matter where they perform, they're going to follow them, and they come here. It's not that far from Eugene, so they're going to come down and listen, because they didn't go to Roseburg last year, so who knows if they're going this year or not. But people know that they're out and about. They're gonna come. I mean, the park fills up. So yes, there's a lot of them are Cottage Grove, but there's also a lot of non-Cottage Grove people in the park, and they're here You're buying food and gas and everything else that comes with it. So the community benefits from it. And if we're getting donations to cover it, then, I mean, what as a city are we really spending other than maybe the $4,000 in other expenses that are not covered? So, but that could be covered by donations too. So.
I swear the symphony is expensive and out of reach for a lot of folks. So
yeah,
to me, that makes it just.
And one time to sit down and listen to them. I mean, it's something that most will never experience.
I hesitate to say it because we got a big job ahead, but I mean, I've had a grandmother come up to me in tears, thanking me for the symphony because she was able to drive to Harrisburg and grab her 2 grandsons and bring them down and experience the symphony. She said, I could not afford to take them to the Holt Center to hear the symphony. I mean, that's the impact that this has in our community.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, if we were to add Bohemia Mining Days, this is where it would go.
Correct.
That's just put it.
To Bohemian Mining Days, that ask this year was substantially less than the 36 last year. And when I'm just thinking of the value that can bring, and I know it sounds like they're taking a recoup and rebuild kind of year. To me, that sounded like, yeah, I'd be in favor of adding that. I like that he said contingent, yes, to get Mike everything he wants to see. And granted that that's, there's no funny business in the numbers. When you look at what does it do to the Culper culture? It's a honoring of heritage of the town. It's different than the symphony, but it's certainly bringing people together, which the more of that we have, I think the better. And at that amount, I don't really understand the resistance, but.
Well, I'll just jump in. Yeah, I'll be honest, they're not putting on an event. I have a real hard time given the history of, the lack of transparency that we saw last year. We were actually scolded and, put down, for something that has not been transparent when we've asked for documentation. I certainly support BMD, but I just do not see, there were some comments last year about, well, if we give this sort of money, are we going to put a counselor on their board like we do with the foundation or we do at the chamber, so that there's some oversight of how our, funds are being utilized. I'm not suggesting for this amount that that's appropriate or not. I guess I would need to see a detailed budget of what that $6,000 is for. I would need to see, financials showing that it's even a viable organization at this point. And the fact that they're not having a festival, I think may be the nail in the coffin. And so are we throwing good money after bad with absolutely no guarantee that it's coming back? I mean, I'm just going to be frank.
You read the minutes from last year, it was stated that they have $35,000 to $36,000 in the current account, so May of this time last year. And they were $5,000 short of raising another $20,000, which if achieved would garner a $15,000 donation. So what do they have at the banks now? What was spent? So it'd be good to look at financials.
And considering what they asked for last year, just $6,000, it's like, does that carry over money or what? I don't understand why they need it.
Can I clarify, we have like Family Relief Nursery, 1,500, Community Sharing, 3,000. And then Singing Creek, 2,000. Did they actually submit a letter? Because I haven't seen any letters requesting it.
No.
See, Mike just showed.
Singing Creek did submit a letter.
Singing Creek did.
Yeah.
But not the Family Relief Nursery. I didn't receive anything specifically from anyone other than Spring Creek and Valley Farmers Market and now BMD. I know that Family Relief Nursery uses this money to leverage other funding. And it's been a longstanding a budget item, not always is it requested. But it has been in the last 2 years, it's been paid.
The pool, I thought the pool, they asked for 90K, but it's only 75 here.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So the family relief, we're gonna keep that? I
That's what's been proposed in front of you, and it's up to you whether you want to or not.
They didn't, whoops. They didn't even ask for it, I think personally. Should be.
So not talking about any organization I may or may not be affiliated with. I will say for a nonprofit to be able to show established of support. I think when you look at these organizations, this amount is not a significant amount to their budget, but a way of, in their grant writing, is a way of showing that they have support from the local community. So I just offer that out there. That has not been something that has been put forth to organizations that they need to request those funds every year. So they have not been, told that there's, an obligation to do that because it's been an ongoing.
My recommendation is we cut and maybe not eliminate, but cut. Because it looks like across the board, they're either going up or they're staying the same. And so if we were in a position, and overall it's gone up just a little bit, but we're in that position where everyone else is sacrificing. So if this is not, and I don't know from the priorities, because we don't have updated priorities, where this falls, but it seems like it's only fair to have some cuts.
Chair, if I may add, we talk about public safety is, I think, a lot of people's top priority. Community promotions is upstream public safety. Like on the day-to-day basis, I do see the cops because I'm like in a friendly manner, not like in a, uh-oh. I go to the library, I go to the farmer's market, like these are the upstream things that our community does see when you talk about what services, what's it like in our community. So I think at the very least, let's get to the end and talk about the overall picture before we're nickel and diming something that really does provide a lot of value to the residents who live here and tourism and promotes economic development. We want vacant businesses to be not vacant. Like these are the types, we want our families to be healthy, relieve nursery, prevent child abuse, which like we're gonna prevent people from having to go to Chief Chase on a non-friendly basis.
I have no position on that.
Just to clarify, the $45,000 for the Chamber of Commerce, that's a set amount in the contract with the room tax, correct? And that's a placeholder for that set amount.
And it may include other things such as dues, participation in events, that sort of thing. So it's not only the room tax dollars. Again, I'm going to bring back that agreement on the transit room tax, what's required, how we can spend that. So I'd be happy to do that. I've got it in my notes here.
I visited with Georgia today and she gave me some papers, but I left them in my car. But I understand what they got 33,000 from us, not the 45. So I think that's changes each year because of the 25% of what the room tax is.
Depends.
Unless there's some other things that get added. So do you know if it's 45 exactly or?
That's what's being budgeted, but
okay, so that's just right. So it doesn't mean that's what it's.
21-22, you spent $42,170.
Okay.
In 22-23, you spent $28,000. A thing called COVID happened.
And it probably was still budgeted at 45, even though we only got 28. So that was the action. Okay.
And again, it was just a repeat of last year's, looking at where we're at currently with receipts. And if we're going to meet that $125,000 and then that portion this year.
Okay.
The community events expense.
Me,
7125.
yeah, let me pull that up out of Springbrook and I can tell you what we spent out of there. We'll look at last year so that we can.
Definitely fluctuates.
So while she's doing that, just add context wise, I believe one of the reasons why the transient room tax was lower in 2022-23 was because the city of Eugene stopped collecting and there was kind of a weird transition to the state doing the collection. A lot of businesses, one of the organizations that I'm a member of, it's like confusing on how to get paid to them. And so I think it's taken a while to get that all worked out. And that's possibly why that number, the actual number was quite a bit lower than the projected budget number.
Community events expense items such as candy for the Halloween hoot night, cup cider for Santa, cookies for Santa. There was a dinner reception for Botswana team and breakfast, volunteer recognition.
Was that essentially a city manager's discretionary authorization fund, community promotions?
For participating in different various community events. Say we wanted to have a team that was represented in the chili cook-off. He would have to decide whether that was an appropriate use of that community events expense we wanted to represent.
I really agree with Alex on this. Maybe these are, other than the pool money, it's pretty small. Maybe we should get to the big numbers and find out that there's some big things we can cut that's not going to make these even look like it's anything in the big scheme of things. I don't know. We're spending a lot of time here over $1,500 and $500 and there's some big money in the back. We could maybe need to.
I could agree with that. I think the reasonable ask of BMD, I'd like to see it plugged in just for the same reasons of showing support, that they can leverage. It's the smallest loss I'm aware of. I know there's a lot of in-kind services that are provided, and that would be great if we're talking about tracking costs. That was a contentious thing last year to where we couldn't come up with the numbers of the in-kind services on the spot. But I'd be happy to.
I would support that too, but along with what Mike said, some of them show us their paperwork and what they're doing too, maybe before Thursday, and we can revisit that, or if they can show us what they're doing. And it would be a good faith thing, and we don't really want to lose that as a community. I don't think if we can keep it going, somebody needs to keep it going.
Do you think that that is their plan too, is to reevaluate and restructure and do real accurate bookkeeping moving forward? So
you can shed some light because you went to that meeting.
Yeah, and they are definitely, they're reorganizing right now, and they're meeting with some funding options that are kind of giving them some good direction, and they're wanting to get back to kind of our roots and go back to the old way of doing things, adding in more of the mining aspect and the shootout and all the stuff we remember when we were kids, and taking it back there, an old school carnival. And they've got a lot of really great ideas, and they definitely want to restructure. And what I'm hearing from them is bring it back bigger and better than it's ever been. And so that just in a more small town feel, and maybe stretching out in advertising so that they bring more tourism in. So I think that would be a big help for them.
So what if we'd made a blanket statement of like $1,500, but we also want to see the financials? So it could be the whole $6,000 ask, but only if we get what we need, but $1,500 is less. We can come back and tweak some of the numbers. It gives them something, a carrot, so they can apply for grants. But there's a carrot to give us more information as well.
Yeah, fair.
I hope we can see something beyond the paperwork. I mean, we know what BMD has been and could be, but we don't really know what it is. They're great ideas, and I can take your word for it, or we can kind of know what we're going to expect or hope to get in the future. It seems like quite a gamble at this point until we know more. I don't know what we're giving money to.
We have things like, and sorry to take more time, but we have like regional events that are like markers in Oregon, you know, the Blackberry Festival, Scandy Fest, Roadie Fest. They have these things that they can take a different flavor and form each year, but they're a thing that people look forward to in Oregon to go to. And I haven't been here my whole life, but BMD is like one of those things that has that recognition. And so I'm not sure what we mean by we don't know what it is. It's like the festival.
We know what it has been and could be, but we don't know what it is. I mean,
Would it be appropriate to ask Joel to come back at their next meeting with particulars on where they think they're headed, how they're going to get there, and what other support that they have from the community to do that? Then you can make an educated decision on, is this something we want to invest in, and know that it's going to be revitalized next year. No guarantees in anything ever, but at least you'd have a roadmap of what they're thinking that they're going to be able to accomplish with the money that they're asking from and where other funds are coming from.
I have one term, Mr. Chair. I have recently joined the Bohemia Mining Days board. So if you have any questions, maybe I can allay any concerns. I'll be glad to answer those. I don't know if that would be appropriate, but
I think for me, I need to see financials. I'm just gonna be really frank. There was a Facebook post, alleging that there was misappropriation of funds. After, the festival, it seems, spent a whole lot more than historical, and there was a outrageous request to us for funding that we've never supported in the past. And I'm sorry to just say that raises real red flags for me as far as the fiscal oversight of this, board at the moment. And so I would like to be able to see, some independent numbers of where, the funds are going and have gone in a budget, that depicts what those expenses are. We're hearing $500 a month, but that's not saying, our insurance is X dollars amount and our, room, costs us this amount of money. And this is how your contribution, fits in that. And those are the sorts of things I think I would want to see. And like I said, I really, I don't want to hold it against folks, but last year, that request was obnoxious. It was offensive. And we were not given the questions or the transparency that we asked for. And so there's, for me, some credibility that needs to be reestablished.
It was very inaccurate too, because the city did a lot. City furnished, barriers and cleaned up the park afterward and the grass and the sprinkler had to be fixed in the bathroom. I mean, there's a lot of logistics there that the city ate all that. So staff.
And they provide security too? Security?
no, BMD paid for security.
beyond the tone and tenor of the way it was presented, it's the message was that they were in severe financial trouble without us supplying half their budget. That means, that looks like something that's coming to pass this year, and that's why I would welcome them to come back and tell us more about their plans and what BMD will be, or what they're hoping it can still be.
It is a different board too. That person is not there either. So I don't believe.
Well, staff can certainly reach out to them and invite them to the meeting.
Since I'm sitting right here, I can definitely carry that request.
Well, and thank you. And I don't mean to personally attack it by any means, but I'm hoping to establish kind of the expectation coming from an agency that is audited for every single item and every receipt and every allocation process. I may be a little bit more of a rigid person when it comes to the expectations than most, but I think there's kind of a base level of accountability that I think I'm asking for. But I'm one of 14, so.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Are there any other, great, yeah, so are there any more questions or comments on community promotions? I think we've got some direction on a couple of the items.
So I just want to clarify about the pool. So you're going to request information from the school district about what their true needs are or the cost of.
Well, I, rather than me try to put words in their mouth, I would prefer to invite them to the meeting. We can circulate the PowerPoint that they presented at council back to the members of the budget committee, so you at least have that information. And, if you'd like, we can invite them to Thursday night's meeting as well.
So I do know that our senior community uses the pool quite heavily and that they see a real value in it. I know that the school district has been very successful in using it to prevent youth drownings, and I'm sure it's really one of those quality of living things. I would, if they're truly needing our support, I would hope to give what we can.
It's an anecdote, appears to be very high demand, and that, there was a long line of people being turned away because there was only 2 lifeguards on duty and there's a minimum set 20 people per lifeguard. So, it isn't accessible because of such high demand, when we go to try to use it as the community there in open swims. And that's indicative of, hey, there's such high demand, you should price accordingly, and maybe there's room to cover your costs. So that's why I wanted to read. We should ask the question, how
Make it more sustainable.
Well, what I would also say is that people that use the pool should pay for the pool a little more. Maybe there should be, a yearly $100 to use the pool. I don't know. And then subsidize those that can't make that kind of money.
Sure.
But I'm sure that there are families that would say, okay, we'll chip in $100.
Well, are there other questions on community promotions? If not, my suggestion would be that perhaps we break now. And, at the start of our Thursday meeting, we'll have looks like 3 or 4 different presentations that you're requesting. And, then we can move on to those issues and then talk about the police budget.
Also, we need to clarify that we discussed on Monday that we were going to start on the Thursday meeting at 7. And I don't know if we can make 3 hours if we have a later start, but we have a lot of material to cover. And we should probably look ahead about reserving our potential third date. Because we are processing a lot of information and seeking to seek a different direction. So
We already have Tuesday.
Yeah, so that was a tentative date, I think, but I think you should probably put it in an ink on Tuesday, the 21st. And that would go back to 6 p.m., I believe.
Unless we can zoom in, my wife and I will be at the Fire Marshal's Conference in Redmond. So next week we leave Friday and then on next week.
You should be able to zoom in. It is
Okay.
I'll be zooming in.
Or she'd be here, but I may be at something else, but she can come.
It will be a meeting that you can participate online.
And we'll work hard to try to improve the audio so that you can hear it too.
Okay.
Not just watch it.
Are you getting word that it's improved as you know?
Speak up, John.
I'll get you though.
Never hear John when I'm just right here.
I'm so.
All right, thank you all. And with that, we are adjourned.
Yeah.
Recess?
Recess.
We are first time rodeo here. We are recessed until 7 p.m. Thursday.